Many of the big problems that you've referred to are problems that governments have to deal with. Now, you, I think, have been involved in advice to government, certainly in the United States, and by reputation at least, have influenced the policy of governments in the United States.
A little bit.
If you work hard and meet your responsibilities, this country is going to honor our collective responsibility to you to ensure that you can save and secure your retirement. That's why we're announcing several common sense changes that will help families put away money for the future. We'll make it easier for people to save their federal tax refunds, which 100 million families receive. Today, if you have a retirement account, you can have your refund deposited directly into your account. With this change, we'll make it easier for those without retirement plans to save their refunds as well. You'll be able to check a box on your tax return to receive your refund as a savings bond.
What would you be advising governments, and particularly the UK government here, to be doing today?
So again, I've only been in the UK for 7 months.
Right.
And therefore, it's difficult for me to have it would be sheer hubris for me to think that I could give advice to the UK government.
Yes.
But I can tell what kinds of questions you might want to ask.
That would be good, yes.
So for example, staying close to home. One of the things that I noted in a panel that I spoke in on this fall, this was a panel at the Parliament about entrepreneurship,
Right.
is that if you look at the top 100 companies in the U.S., and you ask what fraction of those companies were founded less than 30 years ago, you get an impressive list of companies. Google, Amazon.
Yes.
There's, it goes on and on and on.
Exactly. These are giant companies.
If you look at the top 100 companies in the UK and you say, which of those were founded in the last 30 years? And by founded, I mean founded as opposed to they were public entities that became privatized.
Right.
It's a very small number.
Indeed so.
And so a
yes.
question that I think one should ask is, how is it that business and governments can work together to make sure that in the UK you not only start a lot of businesses, but you're able to grow those businesses and scale them up. This session is a particularly important one, and one that I particularly feel very deeply about. At most business schools, you focus on startups and getting things going. But it turns out you have to finish the job as well. And there's ample empirical evidence that suggests that not just starting firms, but actually getting them to grow is what it's all about.
I think you're putting your finger on a very, very important point here, Peter, because I'm a scientist and I've been involved in spinning out technology. And I think I can tell you that the problem, so far as I can see with my colleagues, is not whether they can get the technology out there into the early stage development, launching companies. It is precisely what you put your finger on. 30 years later, those companies are not here. They are somewhere else. So let me see if I can put a point to you and then you take it up, because it'll be your area, not mine. It seems to me, from my experience, that what is going wrong is not those early stages when the angels come in and get you started, when a little bit of startup money comes from here or there, but at a later stage when business sees the opportunity to really grow. And that seems to be where it's failing, and I think that fits with what you're saying. But
I think so. I mean, again, at business schools, it's very trendy to talk about entrepreneurship. and it's important to talk about entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship has been defined almost exclusively as about startups.
Exactly.
And
we can do that.
And that's a great thing. But you know, a less sexy thing to talk about is scale-ups.
Yes.
And
scale-up matters.
And if you look at the statistics, it varies from country to country, but all of them would seem to suggest that a relatively small fraction of startups actually become the larger firms that generate most of the employment.
Yeah.
At least countries in the West. And so we at a business school should be focusing as much, if not more, on scaling up firms as starting up firms.
Yes. The
implications for government are what are the sorts of things that one might do in order to kind of encourage not business formation, but that move from S to M in SME,
exactly
small
so.
to medium,
yes,
and M
exactly.
to L,
and then
large,
to grand,
whatever it
yes,
might be.
whatever you want to call it. Yes,
because that seems to be the bigger opportunity.
Exactly so. So presumably this is going to require that at some stage you interact with those in the university that have gone the route of startups of one kind or another, exploiting their technology, not necessarily in the form of a company, because after all there are many other ways in which universities can, as it were, push technology out into the wider world. But to find ways in which one can encourage the scaling up process that you're describing, and that's going to be a key, isn't it?
Right. Well, first understand that scaling up process.
Indeed. Yes.
I don't think you can encourage it until you understand it. So what are the conditions under which firms can scale up? Are they not scaling up because they have insufficient funding? Are they not scaling up because they have an insufficient market size to address? Despite the fact that the EU is a common market, maybe it's not so common because the practical difficulties of selling your product in multiple countries and multiple languages is too tough. Is the fundamental impediment management skills? Is it ambition? Is it governance issues? I don't quite know why it is that there's
something seems to be going wrong there, because just to repeat the essential point, we have an enviable reputation, except for the United States, in relation, for example, to Nobel Prizes in science and in other subjects. And somehow or another, we get the early stage discovery, we get the formation of a company to exploit that, but not the growth that needs to come later to make sure that you get those world-beating companies. And that surely must be one of the ways in which the British economy is, in some senses, very fragile.
Could well be. On the other hand, there could be another strategy which says form a lot of stuff and then have it be absorbed into larger entities, and maybe that's just a successful strategy. Again, it makes for an interesting research question.
It would be an interesting question to do work on.
Policy and business relevant.
Yes. Yes. If I can return then, because this does return us to the question of interdisciplinarity again, because after all the innovative ideas are going to come from all over the place, aren't they? And again, we shouldn't think they're restricted to science and engineering. They come from humanities as well. So this is not a science versus the humanities issue at all. At least I don't think it is.
Nor do I.
So this relates, I think, to another question which I wanted to put to you, which is that if something is going wrong there, and of course there is, as you said, an interesting question, is it going wrong? Perhaps it's not. But if something is going wrong there, does that mean that we are looking for, or should be looking for, new ways of financial management, new ideas for the way in which we should manage finance? And does the present situation, with the crisis that we've got in relation to finance, does that itself also suggest that we need new ways? Or is that the wrong way to think about it?
I don't know that, at least the discussion we just had was related to finance at all.
No.
It may be that there's no long-term sources of patient capital, but I don't necessarily know that that's it. There are issues in finance that are quite separate from what we've just talked about, which is the growing and scaling the companies.
Yes. So how do you see that? Because obviously this is an area in which I'm relatively naive. I would see it as being, I suppose, a question of finance, because I take it that the scale-up requires a huge amount of money. But maybe I'm thinking of this in the wrong way.
In certain kinds of industries it would, in others not so much. I mean, if you look at for example, LinkedIn, which was founded by an Oxonian, or Google or Amazon. Well, Amazon's probably not a good example, or Twitter. Those businesses require, and that class of businesses requires relatively little capital to get started.
Right.
That's my understanding of this.
Okay.
Relative
Yes.
to a steel mill, relative to an auto manufacturing facility,
Yes, okay.
relative to
Yes.
an R&D operation in a pharmaceutical company.
Yes.
So
these are, as it were, technologies that can, as it were,
They're capital
bootstrap
light.
themselves.
They're
They can
relatively
generate the capital needed to grow. Yes.
And if you look at a lot of the younger firms that have succeeded in this space, their capital requirements have been relatively modest.
Right. Okay. That's a very interesting remark. So, the way I was thinking was a little bit naive. It was, yes, we can do startups. Yes, we can get angels come in to provide that startup cash, but we can't easily get the later stage cash. You're saying perhaps that's the wrong way to think about
So
it.
I don't know. And again,
Yeah.
my newness to the United Kingdom allows me to kind of
Indeed.
punt on some of these questions.
Yes.
But it's not obvious to me that that's the answer.
No. Can I finish this discussion with you, Peter, on a rather more personal note? You've obviously taken on a very, very big job, being Dean of the Business School here. And as you emphasized at the very beginning, a huge challenge. And your move from Harvard to Oxford, Harvard University to Oxford University, is an illustration of the fact that you obviously like the idea of a new challenge. That's great. How do you relax? How at the end of the day do you, as it were, sit back in your chair and say, that's done. What switches you on then? Is it music, theatre?
I have a great family. Start there. I have
Right.
been married for the last 31 years.
Yes.
We have a great 21-year-old daughter, a couple of dogs. They keep
Right.
me pretty well grounded.
I bet the dogs do, yes.
And like anybody else, there are things I like. We go to the theater quite a bit. We travel. I, at Harvard, at least, did a lot of cycling. I haven't done so much yet.
Yes.
Here, one has to remember that life awaits after you leave work, and
Yes.
as long as you remember that, you may be a dean, but you still have to change light bulbs at home.
Yes. Well, Peter Tufano, thank you very, very
My
much
pleasure.
for talking to Voices from Oxford and giving us your insights on what a business school should be doing, how it should be working within a university like the University of Oxford, and some of the general problems that are facing us in relation to the issues that a business school and a university should be dealing with. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.